throw away your textbooks. We are about to explore the side of history your teacher was too embarrassed to teach. We are talking about French royalty pooping in hallways, NASA giving LSD to dolphins, and the time the US government poisoned its own citizens. This isn't the dignified past you imagine. It's a chaotic mess of incompetence, gross hygiene, and insanity. Here are 33 historical facts that will permanently ruin your view of the past. 1. You probably picture the Palace of Versailles as the pinnacle of romance and luxury, but if you traveled back to the 17th century, the first thing to assault your senses wouldn't be the beauty. It would be the horrific smell of human waste. Despite all the gold leaf and expensive mirrors, King Louis XIV's massive palace was built without a functional sewage system or enough toilets for the thousands of aristocrats living there. The reality of court life was that elegantly dressed dukes and duchesses would simply squat in the hallways behind heavy velvet curtains or right in the middle of a conversation in the perfectly manicured gardens. The accumulation of filth was so intense that servants had to constantly spray gallons of heavy perfume everywhere just to keep people from fainting, creating a nauseating cocktail of lavender and raw sewage that defined the smell of the French monarchy. It wasn't high society. It was a glittery, gold-plated biohazard zone where you had to watch your step every single second. 2. In the 1960s, NASA decided that the best use of their budget was a project that sounds like a hallucination, involving a flooded house, a dolphin named Peter, and a lot of drugs. A researcher named Margaret Howe Lovett actually lived in a semi-aquatic home with the dolphin for 10 weeks to teach him English, which is already weird enough. But then the experiment took a dark turn into psychedelic territory. The project's funding was tied to research on LSD, so the scientists began dosing the dolphins with acid to see if the mind-altering drug would somehow unlock their ability to speak human languages. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Instead of a talking dolphin discussing philosophy, the project evolved into an ethical nightmare where the dolphin became aggressively infatuated with his teacher. NASA eventually realized that drugging sea creatures in a flooded house wasn't getting them any closer to the moon or aliens, and they shut down one of the most bizarre chapters in scientific history. 3. We tend to think of the border between the United States and Canada as the friendliest line on Earth, full of maple syrup and politeness. But in the 1930s, the American military was deadly serious about destroying their northern neighbors. They developed a comprehensive top-secret strategy called War Plan Red, which was a step-by-step guide for a full-scale invasion of Canada. This wasn't just a scribble on a napkin. It was a massive operation that included plans to launch chemical weapon attacks on the port of Halifax, to cripple the British Navy, and seizing key cities like Toronto and Montreal with tank divisions. The US government spent millions of dollars updating this plan, genuinely believing that a war with the British Empire was inevitable, and that Canada would be the primary battleground. It is hilarious to imagine American generals sweating over maps of Quebec, plotting to conquer the land of poutine. But until World War II gave them a real enemy, this was their main game plan. 4. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is remembered as a divine conduit of musical genius, a man who wrote symphonies that can bring you to tears. But his private letters reveal that he had the sense of humor of a dirty-minded toddler. Historians have preserved hundreds of his personal letters to his cousin and family, and a shocking amount of them are dedicated entirely to graphic jokes about buttocks and defecation. He didn't just make a stray comment here or there. He wrote entire rhyming verses about breaking wind, and even composed a canon titled Leck mich im Arsch, which translates exactly how you think it does. It is a bizarre cognitive dissonance to realize that the same brain capable of constructing the complex heavenly harmonies of the magic flute was giggling while writing about poop. It just goes to show that you can be one of the greatest artists in human history and still be incredibly immature when no one is watching. 5. Politics can get ugly, but nothing compares to the absolute insanity of the Cadaver Synod, where the Catholic Church decided that death was not a valid excuse to skip a court date. In the year 897, Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, so much that he ordered his rotting corpse to be dug up 7 months after the funeral. They dragged the decomposing body into the courtroom, dressed it in full papal vestments, and propped it up on a throne to face trial for perjury and other crimes. A deacon was even assigned to stand next to the corpse and answer for him, presumably while trying not to vomit. The corpse was found guilty, stripped of its robes, and had the 3 fingers used for blessings chopped off before being thrown into the river. It is a scene that belongs in a horror movie, but it was just a standard Tuesday for the medieval church hierarchy, proving that grudges in Italy last way beyond the grave. 6. The ancient Romans gave us the foundation of modern law, architecture, and democracy, but their dental hygiene routine was something straight out of a nightmare that would make a modern dentist quit their job. Having a bright white smile was a massive status symbol in Rome, and the most popular effective whitening agent they had was human urine, because the ammonia in it actually lifts stains. But the Romans didn't just settle for local produce. They were connoisseurs of waste. The wealthy elite believed that the strongest, most potent urine came from Portugal, so they actually paid a premium to import jugs of Portuguese pee to swish around their mouths every morning. Imagine the luxury of being a Roman senator, putting on your finest toga, and then gargling a cup of imported bodily fluids before heading out to debate the future of the empire. It gives a whole new, terrifying meaning to the concept of having a potty mouth. 7. The Victorian era was obsessed with a fragile, pale aesthetic, and people were willing to do horrifying things to achieve a tiny waistline, including inviting a monster to live inside them. This brings us to the tapeworm diet, which was exactly what it sounds like. People would swallow a pill containing a cyst of a beef tapeworm, with the logic that the parasite would hatch in their intestines and eat a portion of their food for them. You could essentially eat whatever you wanted and still lose weight because you were feeding a 30-foot worm coiled inside your gut. The real horror started when you reached your goal weight and had to get the thing out, which often involved dangerous methods like sitting with a bowl of warm milk in front of your open mouth to lure the worm out, or swallowing choking devices. It is the ultimate proof that humanity's vanity has always been stronger than its survival instinct or common sense. 8. In the modern world, if a farm animal acts up, it becomes dinner. But in medieval Europe, they treated animals as rational citizens who could be sued, arrested, and executed. This was the era of animal trials, a legitimate legal practice where pigs, rats, bulls, and even swarms of insects were formally charged with crimes like murder or property damage. These weren't joke proceedings. The animals were given court-appointed lawyers, witnesses were called to testify, and judges took it all deadly seriously. The most frequent defendants were pigs, who were often accused of attacking children, and if found guilty, they would be dressed in human clothes and publicly hanged in the town square. In one case, a lawyer for a group of rats successfully argued that his clients couldn't attend court because the local alley cats made the journey too dangerous, and the judge actually accepted the excuse. It is a hilarious reminder that our ancestors were trying really hard to be civilized, but they hadn't quite figured out how nature worked. 9. If you grab a can of 7-Up today, you are drinking a sugary lemon-lime soda. But if you drank it back in the 1930s, you were essentially medicating yourself with a powerful mood stabilizer. The original formula contained lithium citrate, a chemical now used strictly to treat bipolar disorder and severe depression. It was marketed under the catchy name Bib Label Lithiated Lemon Lime Soda, and the company genuinely advertised it as a health drink for toddlers, claiming it took the ouch out of the grouch. Moms were encouraged to give it to their hyperactive kids to sedate them, and it became the go-to cure for hangovers because nothing cures a headache like a heavy dose of psychiatric medication. It wasn't until 1948 that the government stepped in and told them to stop drugging the population. But for decades, America was happily buzzing on soft drinks laced with mind-altering chemicals. 10. We worry about nuclear war, but in 1961, the United States almost nuked itself by pure accident, and it came down to a single cheap switch to save the East Coast. A B-52 bomber broke apart in midair over North Carolina, dropping 2 massive hydrogen bombs into a field. These weren't firecrackers. They were 260 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. On one of the bombs, the arming sequence actually initiated. One by one, the safety mechanisms failed. The parachute deployed, the triggers activated, and the batteries charged up. Out of 4 safety switches designed to prevent a detonation, 3 failed completely. The only thing that stood between North Carolina and a radioactive crater the size of a city was one simple low-voltage switch that happened to stay in the off position. It is terrifying to think that millions of lives were saved not by brilliant engineering, but by sheer dumb luck. 11. Benjamin Franklin is revered as a founding father, a brilliant diplomat, and the man who tamed electricity, but he was also a massive troll who loved to waste people's time with bathroom humor. He was so annoyed by the pretentiousness of the Royal Academy of Brussels that he wrote a scientific essay titled "To the Royal Academy of Fart Proudly." In this satirical masterpiece, he proposed that the greatest scientific challenge of the age was not medicine or engineering, but finding a chemical that could make human flatulence smell like perfume. He argued that if scientists could make farts smell like roses or musk, they would be doing a greater service to humanity than any philosopher ever had. He sent this letter to serious academics just to mock them, proving that you can be the smartest man in the room and still have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy. 12. The image of the samurai is usually one of honor, discipline, and poetic justice, but there was a dark side to their culture called tsujigiri, which translates to crossroads killing. During the Edo period, if a samurai bought a new sword, he needed to know if it was sharp enough to cut through a human body in a single strike. Instead of using a dummy or a pig carcass, some samurai practiced a horrific legal loophole where they would go out at night, find a random innocent peasant walking alone at a crossroads, and slice them down just to test the blade. It was essentially state-sanctioned serial killing for the sake of product testing. While the government eventually cracked down on it, for a long time, walking home at night in feudal Japan meant you might literally become a test dummy for a warrior's new shopping purchase. 13. We have a terrible grasp of how long ancient history actually lasted, and nothing proves this better than the timeline of Cleopatra. We tend to lump all of ancient Egypt into one big bucket, assuming she watched the pyramids being built, but that is mathematically impossible. Cleopatra actually lived closer in time to the release of the first iPhone and the moon landing than she did to the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramids were already ancient, crumbling ruins roughly 2,500 years old by the time she was born. She was the last ruler of a dynasty that was actually Greek, not Egyptian, and she would have looked at the pyramids with the same sense of archaeological wonder that we do today. It puts into perspective just how incredibly long that civilization lasted before we showed up with our smartphones. 14. If you think modern beauty trends like vampire facials are weird, they are nothing compared to the skincare routine of wealthy Roman women. In ancient Rome, the ultimate sex symbol was the gladiator, and women were so obsessed with them that they treated their bodily fluids like high-end cosmetics. After a fight, the sweat, dirt, blood, and dead skin would be scraped off the gladiator's body using a tool called a strigil. This disgusting sludge wasn't thrown away. It was bottled and sold at a premium price to fans. Women would buy this gladiator sweat and rub it directly onto their faces as a beauty cream or an aphrodisiac, believing it made them more attractive. It was essentially the ancient version of buying gamer girl bathwater, but significantly grosser and with a higher risk of infection. 15. The history of medicine is full of bad ideas, but the lobotomobile sounds like the plot of a horror movie. In the 1940s and 50s, a doctor named Walter Freeman decided that lobotomies, where you shove an ice pick through a patient's eye socket to sever connections in the brain, should be accessible to everyone, like a pizza delivery service. He bought a van, customized it, and drove across the United States on a road trip, performing lobotomies on thousands of people in the back of his car. He wasn't just treating the severely mentally ill. He operated on people with headaches, moody teenagers, and unfaithful wives. He didn't even use anesthesia, just electroshock to knock them out. The fact that a man was allowed to drive around the country scrambling brains with a glorified kitchen tool in a van is a terrifying testament to how loose medical regulations used to be. 16. If you watch any classic Western movie from Hollywood, you will see a lot of white guys like John Wayne saving the day. But that is a complete whitewash of reality. The Wild West was actually incredibly diverse, and historians estimate that 1 in 4 cowboys was black. After the Civil War, many formerly enslaved people moved west because the job of handling cattle offered more freedom and equality than staying in the South. Furthermore, the entire culture of the cowboy, the hats, the lassos, the chaps, and the herding techniques, wasn't American at all. It was stolen directly from Mexican vaqueros who had been doing it for centuries. The term cowboy itself was originally a derogatory term used for black ranch hands, while white men were called cattlemen. But history eventually blurred the lines and erased the diversity to sell a specific image. 17. When we think of the ultimate warriors of ancient Greece, we usually picture the muscle-bound Spartans from the movie 300. But the real heavy hitters were actually the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite army composed entirely of gay couples. This unit consisted of 150 pairs of male lovers, and their military logic was surprisingly sound. You might abandon a stranger in the heat of battle, but you will fight like a demon to protect the love of your life. This wasn't just a cute experiment. They were the deadliest force in Greece for decades and actually shattered the invincible Spartan army at the Battle of Leuctra. They fought efficiently, died together, and were buried side by side. It turns out that the secret weapon of the ancient world wasn't steroids or better spears, but the sheer, unstoppable power of romance on the battlefield. 18. We look back at ancient tribes as savages for practicing cannibalism, but up until the 19th century, the refined aristocrats of Europe were essentially eating people for breakfast. For hundreds of years, mumia, a powder made from ground-up Egyptian mummies, was considered a miracle cure for everything from headaches to stomach ulcers. The demand was so high that tomb raiders couldn't find enough ancient pharaohs to grind up, so merchants started making fresh mummies out of executed criminals and passing them off as antiques. Imagine a Victorian tea party where a polite society discusses the opera while spooning the dust of a dead human being into their drinks. It is a level of gruesome hypocrisy that is hard to wrap your head around. They called Egyptians primitive while literally eating their ancestors as a dietary supplement. 19. Before he was the tall, somber president in a stovepipe hat who saved the Union, Abraham Lincoln was an absolute beast in the wrestling ring who could probably body slam The Rock. In his youth, Honest Abe was a feared grappler on the frontier circuit, and out of approximately 300 matches, he lost only one. He wasn't just strong. He was the king of trash talk. After winning one match, he reportedly turned to the crowd and shouted, "I'm the big buck of this lick. If any of you want to try it, come on and wet your horns." It completely shatters the image of the quiet, gentle statesman when you realize he could have easily pursued a career in the WWE. If politics hadn't worked out, Lincoln would have been remembered as the guy who put the town bully in a headlock and refused to let go. 20. Modern medicine relies on blood tests and MRI scans, but for centuries, European doctors were essentially professional urine sommeliers. Before chemical analysis existed, the only way to diagnose diabetes was to pour the patient's urine into a cup and take a sip. If it tasted sweet like honey, the diagnosis was confirmed. This practice was so standard that medical textbooks actually described the flavor profiles of different diseases. Doctors would swirl, sniff, and taste bodily waste with the same focus a wine critic gives a vintage Pinot Noir. It is a horrifying reminder that the path to modern science was paved with some truly disgusting pit stops, and you should be eternally grateful that your doctor sends your samples to a lab instead of drinking them in front of you. 21. Henry Ford was a genius at building cars, but he was an absolute disaster at city planning, as proven by the catastrophe known as Fordlandia. In the 1920s, Ford decided he didn't want to buy rubber from the British, so he bought a massive chunk of the Amazon rainforest to build his own American utopia in Brazil. He tried to force-feed American culture to indigenous Brazilian workers, forcing them to live in suburban-style houses, banning alcohol, and making them participate in mandatory square dancing sessions. He even served them oatmeal and hamburgers in the sweltering jungle heat. Unsurprisingly, nature fought back with bugs and disease, and the workers eventually revolted, chasing the American managers into the jungle with machetes. The ruins of this failed capitalist fantasy are still there today, being slowly reclaimed by the forest. 22. In the late 19th century, before television or cinema existed, the hottest entertainment ticket in Paris was a trip to the city morgue. The Paris morgue was designed with large glass windows, specifically so the public could come in and gawk at the unidentified dead bodies found in the Seine River. It wasn't a solemn place of mourning. It was a tourist trap listed in guidebooks. Families would go there on Sunday outings, vendors sold apples and toys outside the doors, and the crowds would gossip about how the people died. If a particularly famous or gruesome murder victim was on display, the lines could stretch for blocks. It proves that our obsession with true crime podcasts and serial killer documentaries isn't new. We have always been a species deeply fascinated by the macabre. We just used to be more honest about it. 23. Today, ketchup is just something you put on fries. But in the 1830s, it was sold as a powerful medicine that could cure almost anything. A physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett claimed that tomatoes were a universal remedy and started selling tomato pills, which were essentially concentrated ketchup. He marketed them as a cure for diarrhea, indigestion, jaundice, and even rheumatism. The craziest part is that people bought it in droves, creating a massive ketchup war, where imitators sold their own tomato pills, claiming even wilder health benefits. Eventually, the empire collapsed when it turned out most of the pills were just laxatives with no tomatoes in them. But for a brief, shining moment, America truly believed that the secret to immortality was hidden in a condiment bottle. 24. During Prohibition, the US government was so frustrated that people kept drinking alcohol, despite the ban, that they decided to resort to chemical warfare against their own citizens. Bootleggers were stealing industrial alcohol used for cleaning and redistilling it to make moonshine, so federal officials ordered manufacturers to poison the industrial supply with kerosene, gasoline, and chloroform to make it undrinkable. They assumed people would stop drinking if they knew it was poison. They were wrong. People drank it anyway, and over 10,000 Americans died from government-mandated poisoning. It remains one of the darkest and most controversial chapters in American history. A moment where the government decided that the punishment for having a cocktail should be death by toxic shock, all in the name of public health. 25. When you picture the most successful pirate in history, you probably imagine a bearded guy like Blackbeard. But the real king of the ocean was actually a Chinese former prostitute named Zheng Yisao. In the early 19th century, she took command of her husband's fleet and transformed it into a disciplined criminal empire of over 40,000 men and hundreds of ships, which was bigger than the navies of most countries. She was a tactical genius who established a brutal legal code. If you stole from the communal fund or disobeyed an order, she cut your head off on the spot. She fought the Chinese Imperial Navy, the British Empire, and the Portuguese, and she remained undefeated against all of them. Eventually, the Chinese government realized they couldn't beat her, so they offered her a truce. She didn't just escape, she negotiated a deal where she got to keep all her loot, avoided prison, and retired peacefully to run a gambling house. She is the only pirate in history who truly won the game. 26. The Victorian era is famous for its elegant fashion, but those beautiful emerald green dresses you see in museums were actually silent killers. In the 19th century, a new dye called Scheele's green became the absolute height of fashion, but the secret ingredient that made the color so vibrant was arsenic. Women were walking around literally draped in poison. As the fabric rubbed against their skin or as they danced and shook dust into the air, the arsenic would slowly absorb into their bodies, causing horrific rashes, hair loss, and eventual death. It wasn't just the wearers who suffered. The seamstresses who sewed the dresses often died young, coughing up green-tinted blood. It is a terrifying example of how humanity will happily ignore blatant biological warning signs if it means looking trendy at the next social ball. 27. We are all taught that Christopher Columbus was a genius who proved the Earth was round, while everyone else thought it was flat. But that is a total lie invented by storytellers. Educated people had known the Earth was round since the ancient Greeks. Eratosthenes had calculated the planet's circumference with shocking accuracy over 1,000 years before Columbus was born. The truth is that Columbus was actually terrible at math. He mistakenly believed the Earth was pear-shaped and much smaller than it actually is, which is why he thought he could sail to Asia so quickly. The royal courts of Europe didn't reject his funding because they were anti-science. They rejected him because they knew his math was wrong and that he would starve to death in the middle of the ocean. He didn't survive because he was smart. He survived because he got incredibly lucky and bumped into a massive continent that he didn't know existed.